If it wasn't for that social security check, we wouldn't even need you here." Those words came from Marcus, my own son. The same boy who once nestled against my chest, his fingers so delicate they resembled flower petals. The same child who would weep if I stepped even a few feet away at the playground. The one who, years ago, would cry out for Mama whenever he stumbled and scraped his knee. That evening, he couldn't even meet my eyes. He stood on the opposite side of the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone as though he were reciting an objective truth, a cold and emotionless fact, a simple calculation. I had been reduced to an income stream, a monthly deposit that kept the household afloat, nothing more. I held a wooden spoon in my hand, stirring the rice to prevent it from sticking to the bottom of the pot. The roast was already baking in the oven. Chloe had mentioned wanting roasted potatoes, so I'd prepared those as well. The kitchen was stifling. My back ached, and I'd spent the entire day cleaning and doing laundry because we were expecting guests. Yet even then, I managed to smile when my granddaughter Skylar burst through the door to embrace me. She was the only reason I kept going. After Marcus spoke those words, silence blanketed the room. Chloe stood in the hallway, offering a tight, thin-lipped smile. She didn't need to say anything. She had already won. I said nothing in return. I simply finished stirring the rice, turned off the burner, and with trembling hands, untied my apron. I couldn't identify what I felt, anger, grief, or some lethal combination of both. I walked to the laundry room, turned on the faucet, and splashed cold water onto my face. I had to regain my composure. Not here. Not in front of them. Sleep evaded me that night. I lay in the bed that had belonged to Walter and me for nearly 40 years. The room barely felt like mine anymore. The walls seemed foreign. My belongings had been condensed to a single dresser and a cardboard box shoved beneath the bed. Everything else had been requisitioned for storage. My entire life had been compressed into corners and crevices. I stared at the ceiling for hours, unable to cry. I had exhausted my tears long ago. As I listened to the low hum of the ceiling fan, only one question through my mind: how did we arrive at this point? Returning to the beginning isn't easy. Sometimes you'd rather not disturb what hurts, but now I understand it's necessary. 3 years ago, after Walter passed away, the house felt cavernous. At first, the solitude felt like a tender echo, a gentle whisper that granted me peace. But over the months, that silence transformed into an abyss. That's why, when Marcus asked for my help, I didn't hesitate for even a moment. "Mom, Chloe lost her job. We're behind on rent, and I don't know what to do. Come stay here at the house," I told him without a second thought. "There's plenty of room." They arrived on a January afternoon, Skylar's small hand clasped between theirs, 3 large suitcases in tow. I had prepared the guest bedroom, changed the linens, and even purchased a new lamp. I was genuinely happy. I had my family back. Skylar hugged me tightly and whispered in my ear, "I missed you so much, Grandma." I believed everything would be fine. Over time, I began noticing small things. Chloe never looked directly at me. She was perpetually busy, perpetually irritated about something. Initially, I attributed it to stress, the pressure of unemployment, the adjustment period. But then the comments began. "Your mom doesn't respect our space," she'd tell Marcus when she thought I was out of earshot. "She's always hovering, acting like this is just her house." And legally, it was mine, completely documented in my name. But I didn't say that aloud. I didn't want to create conflict. Little by little, the house transformed. I continued cooking, cleaning, and paying the bills. My Social Security check, though modest, covered the electricity, the gas, and a portion of the groceries. Marcus had found employment, but it wasn't stable. Chloe still wasn't working, despite wearing new clothes every month. And yet, I began to feel like an intruder. Or at least, that's how they made me feel. One evening, Chloe asked me not to join them for dinner because they needed to have a private discussion. The next day, my chair had vanished from the table. They had removed it. I became invisible. Yet I still prepared breakfast, ran errands, and drove Skylar to school whenever Chloe had a migraine or was too occupied with other matters. I became a shadow that maintained everyone's routine without anyone acknowledging my existence. Until one morning when Marcus asked if he could transfer the house into his name. He claimed it would be more practical for everyone, that it would be better in case of emergency, that things needed to be properly organized. I looked at him for a long moment, and then I did it. I went to the attorney's office, signed the documents, handed over the deed, and trusted him completely. I never imagined they would weaponize it against me. Within a month, my room had been downsized. My private bathroom was now shared. My independence had been systematically erased. I was becoming a background figure, invisible furniture. No one asked how I was doing. No one listened to me, except Skylar. She remained the light in my darkness. Every night, she would climb into my bed, despite Chloe's annoyance. She'd tell me what she learned at school, draw me flowers, and whisper that she loved me very much. She was the sole reason I didn't pack my belongings and leave. Though now, I had nowhere to go. I had given everything away. That night, after Marcus's devastating comment, I understood something with crystalline clarity. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of poor judgment. It wasn't a thoughtless remark uttered in frustration. It was what he truly thought, what he genuinely felt, what he authentically believed. And for the first time in years, I felt something inside me fracture, not with pain, but with clarity. I went to the kitchen after everyone had gone to sleep. I sat before the cold oven, gazing at the pot of rice that was still faintly warm. Then I retrieved my old notebook, the one I used for recipes, and wrote a single sentence. I deserve more than this. The next morning, I rose early, made coffee, styled my hair, and put on the blue dress that Walter always said made me look like a summer sky. And I left without announcing where I was going, without requesting permission. I left not with a suitcase, but with purpose. I didn't walk far. I didn't have a clear destination in mind. But my feet knew where to go. Sometimes the body moves ahead of the mind. I crossed 2 streets, past a bakery that still emanated the aroma of fresh dough, and stopped before a place I hadn't visited in years. It was a modest cafe with hanging plants framing the doorway and wrought iron chairs positioned out front. A wooden sign read, "The Gilded Teacup." I hesitated for a second before entering. She sat behind the counter, flipping through a magazine. Her hair was pulled into a messy bun, and her glasses perched on the tip of her nose. She glanced up, and for a moment, she frowned as if she didn't recognize me. Then her eyes widened. "Ellie!" Vivian exclaimed, her smile returning a piece of my youth to me. My goodness, what a wonderful surprise! I didn't know what to say. My hands were trembling. Vivian had been my closest friend when we were young. We were inseparable until life carried us down divergent paths. She chose to travel, study abroad, and marry a man she later divorced. I remained in the neighborhood, married Walter, raised Marcus, and spent my entire life as a homemaker. She lived 1,000 experiences. I lived within a circle. Yet in that instant, time seemed irrelevant. We embraced as if we'd seen each other yesterday. "What brings you here?" she asked, pouring me a cup of coffee without offering first, as if she knew I desperately needed it. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I just needed to escape the house." "Then you're in exactly the right place," she said, gesturing toward a table by the window. "No one rushes here. No one demands anything. And the coffee is always hot." We sat, and in fragments, I told her what had transpired. Not everything, not yet, but enough for her to comprehend that something fundamental inside me had shattered. Vivian listened without interrupting. Only once did she frown, when I mentioned Marcus's words. Then she remained silent for several seconds. "You know what?" she finally said. "You were always stronger than you believed." I smiled, disbelieving. "You don't see it because you were taught to be silent, to sacrifice, to demand nothing for yourself. But that's not strength, Ellie. That's submission. And you can escape this." I didn't respond, but those words settled deep within me like seeds taking root. I returned home before noon. Chloe looked at me from the sofa, frowning. "Where were you? Taking a walk without informing anyone?" Marcus was worried. It was a lie. He hadn't even noticed my absence. But I said nothing. I went upstairs to my room, closed the door, and lay down. Skylar entered shortly after. "Grandma, are you okay?" "Yes, my love. Just a little tired." She curled up beside me, her warmth a soothing balm. She told me about a drawing she'd created in class, a woman in a cape flying over a city. "She's a hero. I named her Blue Ellie, after you, of course. You're my hero." I didn't cry, but swallowing became difficult. That night, while everyone slept, I wrote another sentence in my notebook. "I don't need permission to start over." The following days were different. I remained the same person, but something fundamental had shifted. I no longer responded immediately when Chloe demanded something. I no longer rushed to set the table or wash the dishes the instant they were dirted. It wasn't rebellion. It was dignity. Small acts of resistance that no one initially noticed. One Thursday afternoon, I returned to the cafe. Vivian was waiting with a tray of fresh muffins and 2 coffees. We sat on the patio. She told me about her travels, about how she decided to open the bistro after her divorce using her savings and a small inheritance. She showed me old photographs. We laughed abundantly. I felt alive. "Why don't you come more often?" she asked. "You could even help me with some of the baking. I know you're a fantastic cook. Working here, I don't see it as work. I see it as reclaiming control." I returned home with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. That evening during dinner, I mentioned casually, "I was at a friend's cafe today." She offered for me to help her with the baking. Marcus didn't look up. Chloe did. "Working? At your age? Why? Why not?" "Because you don't need to. You already have a check coming in regularly. Besides, who will watch Skylar when we're not around?" "Skylar is 12 years old. She can get to school herself. And I need something for me." Silence engulfed the table. No one supported me, but they didn't forbid it either. So I returned to the cafe. The first few days, I felt clumsy, slow, out of place. But Vivian encouraged me continuously. She taught me to operate the register, how to use the espresso machine, and how to organize the display case. She even allowed me to decorate a corner with antique items I had stored at home, an old pendulum clock, a set of teacups inherited from my mother, a vase with dried daisies. Customers began visiting, curious about that nostalgic corner. I served them with a smile. I felt useful, visible, valuable. One day, I met Omar. He entered slowly, a cane in hand, offering a polite smile. He ordered tea with honey and sat down to read the newspaper. He returned every Thursday. Sometimes we discussed books, other times politics. He told me he was a retired attorney, intelligent, kind, always impeccably dressed. He preferred listening to speaking. He made me feel respected. One afternoon as we were closing, Vivian gave me a mischievous look. "I think Omar likes you." I laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous." "Why?" "You're a beautiful woman, Eleanor. You've lived. You've loved. Why couldn't you do it again?" I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't prepared to contemplate that possibility, but hearing it was pleasant nonetheless. One Friday when I returned home, I found my belongings piled in the living room: clothes, books, a box of photographs, my sewing kit. Everything had been removed from my room.
What is this?
Chloe, arms crossed, answered without flinching. We need the space. We're going to remodel and convert that room into an office. We've arranged a corner for you in the laundry room.
There's a cot.
I gasped, not from the humiliation, but from the sheer coldness of it. And Marcus agreed to this? He signed the papers, remember?
The house isn't yours anymore.
I didn't respond. I walked over, picked up one of my photographs, me with Walter and a tiny Marcus, and clutched it to my chest. Then I went upstairs. I slept in the laundry room that night. But before sleeping, I wrote one final sentence in my notebook. The day they stop underestimating me is coming. I barely slept that night. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to quiet. The laundry room smelled of damp concrete and aged detergent. Every sound in the house amplified between those cement walls. But more than that, what kept me awake was memory, not of what had happened that night, but of everything I had permitted before it. I thought about the years I cooked every dinner with care, the times I cared for Skylar when she was ill, the nights I rose quietly so as not to disturb anyone. Every instance I accepted harsh words without defending myself. When exactly did I become an invisible presence in my own family? The next morning, I showered early and dressed in my favorite blouse and an embroidered scarf my mother had given me years ago. Chloe didn't even glance at me when I left. Marcus had shut himself in his study, claiming an urgent video call. I didn't eat breakfast. I had no appetite. I walked to the cafe, feeling a weight on my chest I couldn't shake. But the moment I opened the door of the gilded teacup and heard the little bell chime, something inside me settled. Vivian immediately noticed my expression. What happened now? They evicted me from my room. I'm sleeping in the laundry room. She stopped cleaning the coffee maker and stared at me as if to confirm she'd heard correctly. What do you mean they evicted you? They claimed they need the space. They're converting my room into an office. Vivian removed her apron with a sharp motion and approached. You cannot continue allowing this, Eleanor. This isn't normal, fair, or humane. It's their house. Legally, I may have no rights anymore. Perhaps legally, but morally, they have no right to treat you this way. We remained silent for several seconds. Then she took my hand. There are ways to defend yourself. I know someone who could help. An attorney. He's very good. His name is Omar. Omar? The customer. Yes. Sometimes he takes consultation cases even though he's retired. He doesn't charge. He does it because he believes in justice. I don't know, Vivian. I don't want to escalate this to that level. And what level do you think this is already at? Sleeping among rags and buckets?
Seeing your belongings piled as if you were refuse.
I was speechless. She was right. Every day that passed, I convinced myself I deserved the minimum, that I should be grateful for a roof and meals, even if everything came laced with contempt. But that wasn't the life I wanted. Omar stopped by that afternoon. Vivian had informed him of everything, and he, with that unshakable serenity, sat with me, notebook in hand. The first thing you should understand, he told me, is that even though you transferred the house deed, if we can prove you did so under duress or without fully comprehending the consequences, we could file for rescission based on undue influence. Furthermore, there is legal precedent that recognizes the rights of elderly adults in contexts of family vulnerability. What does that mean in plain English? It means if we can demonstrate you suffered manipulation or emotional abuse, you could recover your share, or at minimum, secure dignified living space in that house or receive appropriate compensation. I looked at him in disbelief. And how do you prove something like that? With witnesses. With your notebook, for example. If you keep a record of what has occurred, that can help substantially. And if Skylar supports you, that matters too. I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't want to involve my granddaughter, but I knew she was already involved simply because she loved me. I thanked Omar and promised to consider it carefully. That night, I returned home determined to speak with Marcus. I waited until Chloe had locked herself in the bedroom, then found him in the kitchen pouring water. I need to talk to you. Right now. No, Mom. I'm tired. No now. Because if I don't speak, I'm going to become ill. Marcus turned and looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. What is it? Everything that's happening hurts me deeply. It hurts to have surrendered my house, my memories, everything I built for you.
And now I'm sleeping in a corner as if I were an intruder.
It's not like that. Yes, it is. And you know it. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted to be close, to be useful, to care for Skylar.
But you took my room away as if I didn't matter.
Marcus clenched his jaw. He said nothing. After a moment, he departed without responding. The next day, I sat with Skylar on the patio. She held a storybook but noticed I was distant. What's wrong, Grandma? I need to do something important, my love, and I might need your help. Her eyes illuminated.
Anything.
Could you write on paper how they treat me here?
I know you've witnessed it all.
She lowered her gaze. Is it for a lawsuit? Not necessarily, but I need evidence to protect myself. Skylar nodded slowly. Then she embraced me.
I don't want you to leave. I won't leave without fighting.
Over the next several days, Omar and I began working in quiet. He taught me how to document every incident, how to speak without my voice trembling, how to maintain eye contact without dropping my head. Vivian supported me completely, offering flexible hours at the cafe, advice, and most importantly, companionship. I never felt alone in that process. One afternoon upon returning home, I found my sewing kit thrown on the floor, some needles broken, threads scattered everywhere, my scissors rusted. It was my most treasured possession. I picked it up carefully. I went upstairs without uttering a word. And that night, I knew the decision was made. The following day, I brought all my papers to the cafe. Omar reviewed them meticulously, then looked up. We're ready. Just tell me when you want to initiate the process. Now. Then be prepared, Eleanor, because once you start, there's no turning back. I looked at him firmly. I don't want to go back. We filed the lawsuit on a Friday morning. Omar delivered it personally to the county courthouse. He explained that we now had to await formal notification to Marcus and Chloe. Despite the firm step we'd taken, I returned home with a knot in my throat. I felt divided, on one hand, proud to have taken that step, on the other, devastated by the prospect of facing my own son in court. But there was no turning back. It wasn't revenge. It was dignity. The following days passed in heavy silence. I said nothing, and neither did they. Chloe continued moving through the house as if floating in her own world, organizing items, issuing subtle orders to Skylar, completely ignoring me. Marcus avoided eye contact. Only Skylar remained close, sitting beside me every night with her books or simply in silence, holding my hand. One afternoon while I was making tea in the kitchen, I heard insistent knocking at the door. I went to open it. A court officer stood there.
Marcus descended the stairs when he heard voices and froze upon seeing the man with an envelope in hand.
Marcus Vance? The officer asked. Yes. Judicial notification. You have a deadline to respond. He handed him the envelope, obtained his signature on a receipt, and departed.
The silence that remained was like a fissure through the center of the house.
Chloe rushed downstairs immediately. Seeing the envelope in Marcus's hands, she snatched it violently.
What is this?
Marcus read aloud. his lips tightening. It's from Mom. She's suing us. Chloe looked at me as if I had just spat in her face. What kind of low, despicable thing is this? A defense. I won't remain silent anymore. She laughed contemptuously. And what do you think you'll achieve? Taking the house from us? No. Just reclaiming my right to live with dignity. To not be invisible. To not be treated like discarded furniture. This is betrayal. Marcus suddenly yelled. After everything we did for you? What did you do for me? You took my room away, made me a burden, used my retirement check as if it were yours. Skylar appeared behind them without anyone noticing. She had heard everything. She walked slowly and stood beside me. I support her, Dad. Marcus looked at her, surprised. What are you saying? Grandma doesn't deserve this. I've seen how you treat her. It's not fair. Chloe released an incredulous laugh. Perfect. Now the child is taking sides too. Marcus looked downward. He didn't respond. Chloe stormed upstairs, and the bedroom door slammed shut. My son looked at me for an extended moment. There was no hatred in his eyes. There was something worse, shame. Was this necessary? Yes, I answered calmly, because I tried everything else first. I talked. I endured. I made myself small. But you didn't change. And I don't want to disappear anymore. Marcus said nothing further. That night, the house was quieter than ever, as if something had irreparably broken, and everyone knew it could never be repaired. The following days were filled with constant tension. Chloe behaved like a hostile stranger. She would brush against my shoulders forcefully when passing. She left doors open so noise would reach the laundry room where I slept. She changed meal times. Sometimes they served me nothing, but it no longer affected me the same way. I knew I had to document this too. Every offense became evidence. Omar accompanied me to the initial hearings. Recounting my story before strangers was simultaneously humiliating and liberating. I told everything. How I transferred the house out of love, how they marginalized me, how I gradually lost my place. Skylar wrote a letter that was submitted to the judge. Her words were so pure, so honest, that even the court clerk had to look away. My grandma has always been there for me. She cared for me when no one else could. I witnessed when they shut her out, when they stopped talking to her, when they pretended she didn't exist. I don't understand why anyone would treat the person who gave us everything that way. I read it in a steady voice before Omar. It was then I understood that my granddaughter possessed more courage than many adults. I smiled at her from where I stood. She, sitting in the back row, returned my gaze with shining eyes. In parallel, Vivian became my foundation. She provided strength when I wanted to falter. She reminded me of who I was before all this. One day, she took me for a walk in a nearby park. She discussed her life, how she traveled alone in her 50s, the decisions that distanced her from family, the wounds and scars that took time to heal. Freedom doesn't arrive all at once, Eleanor. It's constructed, and it hurts. But once you achieve it, there's no turning back. That phrase echoed in my mind. One morning, we received notification that a mediation hearing would be scheduled. It was the final opportunity to reach agreement without a judge's sentence. I went with a heavy heart. Omar explained that if Marcus agreed, we could establish a written agreement, a private room, unrestricted access to common areas, respect, and a proportional portion of the Social Security check for me. We waited in the small room. They arrived late. Chloe entered as if she'd come from a social event. Marcus, however, had sunken eyes. When the mediator explained the conditions, Chloe stood up indignant. This is blackmail. It's an agreement, Omar said. And it's voluntary. No one is forcing you. But if you don't sign, we proceed to sentencing, and the judge will decide. Marcus swallowed. He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he would accept, but Chloe touched his arm, whispered something, and he lowered his gaze. We don't accept. The mediator nodded. Then the trial continues. We departed in silence. That night, without saying a word, I prepared a small box with important items, photographs, old letters, a scarf my mother embroidered for me, and Skylar's letter. I hid it in a corner of the laundry room wrapped in plastic, as if it were treasure. Because it was treasure, not for its material value, but because it represented what they could never take from me, my memory, my truth, my story, and now also my decision to never be silent again. The following weeks grew colder, denser, not from weather, but from the atmosphere inside the house. Everything became silent, like forced calm before an inevitable storm. I moved cautiously, as if every step could provoke another explosion of shouts or harsh glances. Chloe seemed determined to prove I had no power over anything, and each day she discovered new methods to demonstrate it. She changed the lock on the hallway bathroom so I could only use the one in the laundry room, which didn't even have hot water. She installed latches on the pantry where basic foods were kept. She left me stale bread, unsalted rice, and watered-down coffee. I didn't complain. I simply documented everything. Omar had asked me to record every hostile act. I kept a notebook hidden among my books where I noted dates, words, actions. I was no longer a resigned victim. I was a quiet observer, patiently collecting evidence. Skylar, for her part, was becoming increasingly rebellious. She began staying at her friend Brianna's house to avoid arguments. She asked her father if she could sleep at Vivian's house some nights. Although Marcus initially permitted it, Chloe quickly prohibited it. She claimed Vivian was filling my head with nonsense and didn't want her daughter influenced by some crazy old woman. Skylar confronted her. I had never witnessed her yell like that. Chloe slapped her. I saw everything through the partially open door. I ran to my granddaughter, embraced her, and covered her with my body as if she were still a defenseless child. Chloe shouted at me not to interfere, that it was none of my business. Marcus descended late. When he arrived, Skylar had already locked herself in her room, and my hand trembled against my chest. He said nothing, not a word, not a reproach, not a comfort. He simply looked at Chloe the way one observes fire, knowing it has already consumed everything. The next day, Skylar didn't attend school. She remained with me all day, sitting in the shade of the patio, speaking little. I made her hot cocoa the way I prepared it when she was small. She asked if I was ever happy. I told her yes, many times, although it had been considerable time since I remembered it clearly. She smiled sadly. I want you to be happy again, Grandma. Maybe that's not for me anymore, honey. Yes, it is. You just have to believe it. That night, I wrote in my notebook, Skylar still believes in me. I must start believing in myself again, too. Several days later, we received notification from the county courthouse. The trial date had been established. Omar called to explain the details. Hearing that we finally had a formal hearing made me tremble, not from fear, but from the certainty that what was at stake was far more than just a residence. It was my dignity. It was my place in the world. Marcus and Chloe discovered this through official mail. I said nothing. Neither did they. They locked themselves in their room and spent hours murmuring. At night, Chloe departed without announcing her destination. Marcus remained alone in the kitchen. I observed him sitting with his head in his hands, as if suddenly the entire weight of the universe had settled upon him. I approached, not from compassion, but from necessity. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes were red, as if he'd been crying or hadn't slept in days. "I don't know how we arrived at this, Mom. Yes, you do. But you don't want to accept it. She told me you wanted to take the house from us, that you were going to leave us homeless.
And you believed her?
I don't know. I sat across from him. The silence between us weighed more than any words could. Marcus, I don't want revenge. I don't want to ruin your life or Skylar's. I just want respect, peace, a space of my own, a dignified old age without fear. But you were fine before, weren't you? I was silent before.
There's a difference.
He said nothing else, just nodded as if he finally comprehended something. Not everything, but something. He went to sleep without looking at me again. The trial was approaching. Vivian took me shopping for clothes. She insisted I needed to present myself as confident, firm, like the woman I used to be. She styled my hair, applied light makeup, and gave me a blue scarf she'd brought back from Morocco. She said it was to provide strength. That morning, looking in the mirror, I saw myself differently, more upright, more present, as if I was finally beginning to recognize myself. At the courthouse, Omar was waiting with his briefcase. He was impeccable, calm, with that manner of speaking that inspired confidence. He provided final instructions. Then we entered. Marcus arrived alone. Chloe refused to attend. Skylar was with Vivian, who had taken her to the park. I didn't want her to witness this. Inside the courtroom, the judge observed us carefully. He listened as Omar presented the facts. He submitted documents, photographs, and testimonials. We read Skylar's letter. The judge requested it be read aloud. His tone changed as he listened. He paused several times, as if the weight of each word was too substantial to continue straight through. Marcus kept his eyes downward.
He said nothing until his turn, and then he offered an apology.
Not excuses, apologies. He acknowledged his silence, his emotional abandonment, his complicity through omission. My mother doesn't deserve to live like this. I failed as a son. I admit it. The judge looked at him gravely. Are you willing to correct that? Marcus nodded. The judge took a moment, then delivered his decision. Marcus was ordered to restore a private room to me, grant unrestricted access to common areas, provide full respect for my autonomy, and return partial control over my income. A formal warning was also issued to Chloe, who was required to refrain from any hostile action against me or face criminal charges. I departed the courthouse in silence. Omar walked me to the exit. Vivian and Skylar were waiting outside. My granddaughter ran toward me and embraced me so tightly I felt all my bones realign. You won, Grandma. No, honey. I just reclaimed what I never should have lost. That night, I returned home with my head held high. Marcus greeted me at the door and offered tea. He didn't speak much, but his gestures were different. Chloe wasn't there. She had gone to her mother's house, outraged by the ruling. I didn't know if she would return, and I didn't care. I slept in the room that was once mine, clean, organized, with my belongings back in their proper places. I lit a candle, prayed silently, and for the first time in considerable time, I fell asleep without fear. For the weeks following the trial, the house seemed to breathe differently. The air was no longer so heavy with tension, and while I couldn't claim the calm was complete, at minimum the open warfare seemed to have ceased. Chloe didn't return immediately. According to Marcus, she had taken time to think, although I suspected her real objective was to pressure him emotionally. I didn't comment. My role was no longer that of mediator or silenced victim. It was that of a woman who had decided not to permit further abuse, regardless of who it came from. Marcus began showing small signs of regret. He would ask if I needed anything when he went out, or if I wanted to accompany him shopping. He even cooked several times, something he had never done before. I accepted cautiously. It wasn't resentment that made me maintain distance. It was the desire not to confuse politeness with redemption. Years of neglect are not erased with a couple of kind gestures. Skylar, meanwhile, grew increasingly close. She helped me,